My name is Amber. I'm 27 years old and, not long ago, my entire academic world came crashing down. Literally. It happened last spring during what was supposed to be the final, most triumphant phase of my graduate journey. My younger brother Tyler, in a moment of unchecked rage, shattered my entire master's thesis with one furious slam of my laptop. Just like that. 18 months of rigorous research, hours upon hours of intricate coding, data analysis, writing, and revisions, obliterated in the blink of an eye. It was like watching my future evaporate into thin air. Panicked and devastated, I ran to the only people I thought might care, my parents. I needed comfort, support, or at the very least someone to acknowledge the gravity of what had just happened, but instead my mother laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, sweetie," she said, smirking like it was some minor mishap. "You're just too sensitive." My father, ever the dismissive type, barely glanced up from his paper and actually chuckled. "Maybe she wasn't cut out to graduate," he said with a shrug, as if my aspirations had been a running joke all along. To them, that moment marked the end of my academic ambitions. They thought I'd just give up, move on, and settle for something less. What they couldn't possibly know was that this wasn't the end, not even close. This was just the beginning of something bigger, something they never saw coming. But before I share how I turned what felt like total devastation into the most rewarding achievement of my life, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And be sure to subscribe if you want more stories about betrayal, resilience, and the sweetest revenge life can offer. I grew up in a suburban town in Michigan, in a typical middle-class neighborhood, with neatly trimmed lawns and the distant hum of lawnmowers on weekends. Ours was a house where academic success was acknowledged, yes, but never truly celebrated. From as early as I can remember, I had a knack for problem solving. Mathematics fascinated me. Computer logic, algorithms, code. They made sense when everything else in life didn't. While I spent weekends curled up with programming books and Sudoku puzzles, my younger brother Tyler thrived on adrenaline, football, parties, and popularity. I became the first in our family to attend college, earning a full scholarship to the University of Michigan to pursue a bachelor's degree in computer science. My parents, Linda and Robert, came to my high school graduation, but their excitement was muted. They spent most of the ceremony whispering about Tyler's upcoming playoff game. And when I walked across the stage to collect my diploma from Michigan, with honors no less, they showed up late and left early to make it to one of Tyler's fraternity parties. This pattern was consistent. My successes were mere side notes, quickly brushed aside to keep the spotlight firmly on Tyler. Tyler is 4 years younger than me. At 23, he had always been the favored one, blessed with athletic charm, a magnetic personality, and the kind of effortless confidence that made people gravitate toward him. After a single semester at community college, he dropped out, declaring it wasn't for him. He found a semi-steady gig working construction for our uncle, and funneled most of his paycheck into weekend parties, oversized truck modifications, and the occasional gym membership. Meanwhile, I had poured myself into a demanding master's program focused on advanced computational algorithms. My thesis was the culmination of a year and a half of dedication and sleepless nights. It centered around a pioneering algorithm for predictive analysis within healthcare data, aimed at detecting early markers for diseases that often go undiagnosed until it's too late. Professor Diana Martinez, my advisor, was my anchor through it all. She believed in me deeply, in a way my family never did. This work could make a genuine difference in the world, she often told me, her voice brimming with encouragement. It was her unwavering support that kept me going through the most difficult stretches. Each week, during strained phone calls home, my mother's voice would chirp about Tyler. "Your brother made the winning touchdown," she would exclaim. Rarely did she ask about my progress. If she did, it was a dismissive, "How's your computer stuff?" as though my research was a passing hobby rather than a serious academic pursuit. I once tried to explain the scope of my project, its potential real-world applications, its innovation, but their eyes glazed over. When I shared the news that I was being considered for a prestigious fellowship, my mom pivoted to talk about Tyler's new girlfriend. And when I mentioned winning a departmental award, my dad interrupted to ask, "Did it come with money?" His face visibly fell when I told him it was purely academic. I was careful with my work. I maintained several backups, external drives, cloud storage, and encrypted archives. But 3 weeks before my deadline, disaster crept in unnoticed. My cloud storage subscription expired. I had meant to renew it, of course, but in the chaos of making final edits and tweaks, I overlooked it. My latest external backup was already outdated by 2 weeks, missing critical improvements and refinements. With my deadline approaching and my stress levels spiking, I returned home for spring break, hoping for a quiet environment where I could work without distraction. "Can't you just go to the library?" my mom asked when I mentioned needing focus. Tyler's having some friends over this weekend. I reminded her that all my notes and setup were here, in my old room. I just need everyone to respect that I'm on a deadline, I said firmly. My dad gave a vague nod, but it was clear neither of them understood the weight of what I was working on. To them, it was still just schoolwork, something transient and trivial. What they failed to see was that this thesis was the key to everything I had been working toward. Professor Diana was checking in daily. Her latest email read, "Amber, your optimization method for this algorithm is genuinely groundbreaking. I can't wait to read the final submission. This could open incredible doors for you." That validation meant more than they could ever imagine. With her encouragement, I had applied for roles at major tech companies and research labs, each one dependent on the successful completion of my thesis. The morning before everything went south, I opened my inbox to find a message from Tech Innovate, one of the top research firms in the country. They were interested, truly interested in my work. "We would love to review your final thesis once it's defended," they wrote. "There may be an opening in our research division that aligns perfectly with your focus." It was the kind of opportunity people dream of, a real chance to prove my work mattered. Fueled by renewed determination, I threw myself into the final stages of revision. Just one more week, I thought. One more week of focused effort and everything would change. What I didn't realize was that Tyler had other ideas. The day it happened felt like any other. I woke up early, brewed a large cup of dark roast, and settled into my childhood desk, the same one I used back in high school. The room looked much the same, walls still lined with faded posters, though instead of pop bands, mine featured mathematical theories and computer science conference flyers. My desk was a haven of precision. Laptop at the center, notebooks neatly stacked by topic, sticky notes color-coded and arranged by priority. I had no clue that within a few hours all of it would be gone. In the whirlwind of my family's barely contained chaos, I had managed to carve out a sanctuary of focus, a fragile bubble of productivity that existed in stark contrast to the ever-present noise of my childhood home. By 8 a.m., I was fully immersed in refining one of the most intricate components of my thesis, a section of the algorithm that demanded absolute precision. This was the kind of intellectual labor that could not afford distractions. A single error in logic, a misplaced decimal, or one overlooked variable could compromise the entire predictive model I had spent the last 18 months developing. The house for once was still. My parents had gone out for errands, and I believed I had several hours of peace ahead of me. The soft tapping of my fingers on the keyboard and the faint instrumental tones of my study playlist were the only sounds in the room. I was finally making meaningful progress, untangling a particularly stubborn function in my code, when just around noon, the front door slammed open. The sound echoed sharply through the hallway, and a familiar, thunderous voice rang out. Tyler was home. My pulse quickened. He wasn't supposed to be back until the evening. Mom and Dad had mentioned he'd be working at the construction site all day. I tried to steady my breathing and clung desperately to the thread of concentration I had worked so hard to build. I increased the volume in my earbuds, hoping to drown out the inevitable storm that had just walked through the front door. That hope was short-lived. Barely 20 minutes passed before my bedroom door flew open without warning. There, in the doorway, stood Tyler, grinning like he owned the place. Flanking him were two of his longtime buddies, Jake and Brandon, both of whom I recognized from his high school football days. Each one clutched an open beer can, despite it being just past noon. "Hey nerd, we're setting up for a party tonight," Tyler announced, stepping into my room without so much as a knock or a glance at the work displayed on my screen. I pulled out one earbud and turned slowly toward them. "I thought you were working today," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Mom and Dad said the house would be quiet." Tyler gave a nonchalant shrug. "Plans changed. The boss let us off early. Besides, it's spring break. No one's supposed to be doing homework." I closed my eyes briefly to steady myself before responding. "This isn't homework, Tyler. It's my master's thesis. I have a final deadline next week, and I really need quiet." Brandon leaned against my doorframe, sipping his beer with an exaggerated smirk. "Sounds boring as hell," he muttered. Tyler, completely ignoring the tension in the room, scanned my workspace. "Hey, we need the Bluetooth speaker. I think Dad left it in here." "I haven't seen it," I replied tightly, already feeling the first stirrings of a tension headache forming behind my eyes. "Could you guys please just close the door? I really need to concentrate." With a theatrical roll of his eyes, Tyler turned to his friends. "Jesus, Amber, lighten up. It's not like your computer project is saving lives or anything." His words hit like a slap, not just because they were dismissive, but because of the bitter irony. My algorithm was designed to detect early warning signs of life-threatening diseases. The goal was to literally save lives. But I knew better than to try to explain. Tyler didn't want to understand. He never had. Just keep the noise down, okay? I'll be done in a few hours. Then I'll get out of your way, I said, my voice tight with restraint. Tyler gave a lazy shrug and turned away, leading his friends out. I closed the door behind them, exhaled slowly, and tried to refocus. I returned to my code, but the thread of clarity I had so painstakingly cultivated was unraveling fast. Within an hour, more of Tyler's friends had arrived. The once quiet house now pulsed with loud music, bursts of raucous laughter, and the unmistakable thump of subwoofers echoing through the walls. By 3:00 p.m., it had become intolerable. I reluctantly saved my progress, put my laptop to sleep, and went downstairs for water, and to plead, once again, for some semblance of quiet. The kitchen looked like a frat house. Pizza boxes were stacked haphazardly on the counter, beer cans littered every surface, and chip bags crinkled underfoot. Tyler and his growing group of friends were glued to the living room TV, shouting over each other as they played video games at full blast. "Tyler, can you please turn it down just a little?" I asked, trying to be heard above the noise. He didn't even look at me. "Can't hear the game if we turn it down," he muttered. "Well, I can't hear myself think upstairs," I replied, my tone sharper now. "I just need a few hours of quiet so I can finish this work." Jake, slouched across the couch like a king, laughed. "Dude, your sister is such a buzzkill." Tyler's face darkened. "This is my house too. Why don't you go to the library or something if you need it so quiet?" "Because all my notes and equipment are here," I said, struggling to stay calm. "I've been planning to work here all week. Mom and Dad told me it would be quiet." "Well, Mom and Dad aren't here," he snapped, "and we're having fun. The world doesn't revolve around your stupid thesis." That did it. "It's not stupid," I shot back. "It's my future. Just because you dropped out after one semester doesn't mean education doesn't matter." I knew I had crossed a line the moment the words left my mouth. Tyler's eyes blazed and the room fell awkwardly silent. "At least I have friends and a life," he snarled. "What's the point of all your precious education if you're just a boring nobody that no one wants to hang out with?" His words cut deeper than I expected. Fighting the lump rising in my throat, I quietly filled my glass, turned, and walked back upstairs without another word. My hands trembled as I closed my bedroom door behind me. Seconds later, the music volume rose even higher, a deliberate provocation. I sat back at my desk, heart racing, and tried to resume where I'd left off. The section I was working on was highly sensitive. Any misstep in the code could compromise weeks of calibration. But the pounding bass, the occasional shouts, and the sharp sting of Tyler's words made concentration nearly impossible. Around 5:00 p.m., I heard the unmistakable sound of our parents' car pulling into the driveway. Relief surged through me. Surely now, with them home, they'd rein in the chaos. They had to. I didn't pause my work, certain the house would settle down any minute. But instead of order being restored, I heard my mother's delighted voice ring out. "Well, isn't this a nice surprise? I didn't know you were having friends over, Tyler." Then came my father's voice, cheerful and carefree, greeting Tyler's buddies by name, laughing and asking about their favorite teams. The music volume remained unchanged. Finally, unable to take it any longer, I saved my work once again and headed downstairs. I found my parents in the kitchen, casually unpacking groceries, completely indifferent to the mess and the chaos surrounding them. "Mom, Dad, I really need some quiet to work on my thesis," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The deadline's next week and I have major revisions to complete." My mother looked up, clearly annoyed. "Amber, it's spring break. Tyler has his friends over. Can't you just work around it?" "I've been trying to all day," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying all day," I said, the frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "But it's really loud and I need to concentrate." My father let out an exasperated sigh, barely pausing from slicing open a bag of salad. "Maybe you should have stayed at school if you needed to work so badly. This is family time." Family time. The phrase stung more than I expected. I clenched my fists at my sides. "I came home because you both told me it would be quiet here," I reminded them, trying to keep the edge from my voice. "I asked you before spring break if it would be a good environment to work. You both said yes." My mother, now unloading canned goods into the pantry, spoke without turning around. "Well, we didn't know Tyler would have a little get-together." "A little get-together?" I echoed, incredulous. "There are 10 people in the house, the music is shaking the walls, and I have a career-defining deadline next week." She finally turned to face me, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't be so dramatic, Amber. It's just schoolwork. Life goes on, whether you finish your paper or not." The words struck me like a slap. After everything, months of sacrifice, of working late into the night, weekends spent immersed in research, turning down social events, all for this one goal, they still saw it as nothing more than a glorified homework assignment. My thesis wasn't a paper to me. It was the culmination of years of dedication. The very thing that could launch my future. Their indifference felt like betrayal. I stood silently in the kitchen, watching my parents prepare dinner as if nothing were out of the ordinary. They were chopping vegetables, arranging snacks, and preheating the oven for Tyler's impromptu party. No concern for the mess. No recognition of my plea. And certainly no support. In that moment, I understood exactly where I stood in this family. I wasn't the gifted daughter with a bright future. I was the inconvenient one. The one whose work and aspirations were always overshadowed by the golden child's social calendar. And without another word, I turned and walked back upstairs. I shut the door to my room, trying to muffle the chaos below. I told myself I just needed to make it through tonight. Tomorrow I'd find another place to work, a coffee shop, a campus lab, anywhere but here, somewhere my ambition wouldn't be treated like a nuisance. I had no idea that tomorrow would be too late. Back at my desk, I resumed where I had left off. I buried myself in code, desperate to shut out the noise. My earbuds barely helped. The bass from the music downstairs throbbed through the floor, but I pressed on, refining a complex subroutine. If I could just finish this section tonight, I'd be in good shape to meet my deadline. I was so focused I didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. My bedroom door burst open, crashing against the wall. Tyler stood in the doorway, face flushed and eyes glassy from drinking. Jake and Brandon flanked him like drunken bodyguards. The stench of beer and sweat filled the room. "Still at it, huh?" Tyler slurred, leaning against the door frame, barely able to keep himself upright. "You know what your problem is, Amber. You don't know how to have fun." I instinctively saved my document, a reflex honed by years of careful diligence. "I do have fun, Tyler," I said evenly. "Just not when I'm facing a deadline that could determine the rest of my life." Jake snorted from behind him. "Computer nerd's idea of fun is probably what, debugging code?" I ignored him and turned back to my screen. "I just need to finish this section tonight. Can you guys please leave me alone for a few more hours?" Tyler pushed himself off the doorframe, stumbling forward. His gait was unsteady, his expression unpredictable. "No," he said, his voice suddenly hard. "I don't think I will." He stepped closer, looming over my chair. "I'm sick of everyone tiptoeing around because precious Amber needs her quiet time. For what, some dumb thesis no one will ever read?" I clenched my jaw. "I'm not asking for much. Just some basic respect for my work." "Respect?" He barked out a laugh, devoid of humor. "You want respect? For sitting alone in your room typing all day? What about respect for me? This is my house too." Brandon wandered over to my bookshelf, casually lifting one of my academic awards. "Damn, you really are a nerd," he muttered, flipping over the engraved plaque from my undergrad honors symposium. "Please don't touch that," I said, panic rising in my chest as he handled it carelessly. "Or what?" Brandon sneered, making no move to return it. Tyler was now behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his breath on my neck. "You know what, Amber?" he said, his voice low and venomous. "I think you need a break. Come downstairs, have a beer, stop pretending. You're better than everyone." "I'll come down when I finish this," I replied, my voice trembling but firm. "Just give me an hour." "An hour. A day, a week. It's always something with you," he snapped. "Mom and Dad think you're so special. Amber's going places. Amber's so smart. I'm sick of hearing it." I spun around, stunned. "What are you talking about? They barely acknowledge my work. All they do is brag about your football stats and your social life. They've been doing it since we were kids." His expression darkened, and for a moment, I saw something else behind the anger. Hurt, maybe. "That's such bull. They brag about you to everyone. Our daughter, the genius. Our daughter, the computer whiz getting her master's degree. Meanwhile, I'm just the loser who couldn't handle college." I stared at him, stunned into silence. I'd never considered that he felt like a failure. That maybe, in some warped way, he resented me for being what he thought they valued more. But before I could respond, Tyler's gaze dropped to my laptop, where lines of code and predictive modeling formulas filled the screen. "This is it, huh? The precious thesis?" His voice took on a dangerous edge. "This stupid computer program is more important than your family?" "It's not just a program," I began. "It's an algorithm designed to—" I never got to finish. In a single, rage-filled motion, Tyler grabbed my laptop from the desk. The cord ripped from the wall, papers scattered to the floor. "Tyler!" I screamed, lunging toward him. "What are you doing?" He held the laptop above his head, just out of reach. "Let's see how important this really is." "Tyler, please," I begged, my voice cracking. "Everything is on there, my whole future." He grinned, cold and cruel. "Your thesis? Who cares?" And then he brought it down with all his strength. The crack of shattered plastic and glass echoed through the room like a gunshot. My breath caught in my throat as I watched the screen fracture, splintering like ice under pressure, but he wasn't finished. He raised his foot and stomped down on the remains. The screen caved in with a sickening crunch. I dropped to my knees, a guttural cry escaping my chest as I scrambled to collect the broken pieces. Keys were scattered across the floor. The screen was shattered beyond recognition. My thesis, my life's work, was gone. The laptop case had cracked wide open, exposing the mangled components inside. Its fragile wiring and once pristine motherboard now bent and shattered. It was more than a broken device. It was the physical manifestation of 18 relentless months of my life. Countless nights of intricate coding, exhaustive research, data modeling, statistical testing, and painstaking revisions, all reduced to a pile of twisted metal and fractured plastic in mere seconds of mindless destruction. "Oh my God," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding in my ears. Tears blurred my vision, turning the wreckage in my hands into a distorted blur. "Why would you do this?" For the first time that night, Jake and Brandon stood completely still. The drunken amusement that had animated their expressions only moments earlier vanished as the weight of what had just occurred settled around us like smoke in a fire-damaged room. Brandon muttered under his breath, "Dude, that was seriously messed up." Tyler's grin faltered, flickering with uncertainty. For a heartbeat, he looked almost shaken, as if he realized he had crossed a line even he couldn't joke his way back from. But it didn't last. He straightened, tossing his head defiantly. "It's just a computer," he said, the dismissiveness in his tone cutting deeper than the act itself. "She'll get another one." I clutched the shattered remains of my laptop to my chest, shielding it instinctively, though there was nothing left to save. Without saying a word, I pushed past the trio and stumbled down the stairs, my heart hammering with panic and fury. My parents would understand, I told myself. They would see how serious this was. They would help. They had to. I found them in the kitchen, the bright overhead lights casting a warm, cozy glow that felt utterly at odds with the chaos burning inside me. My mother was arranging crackers and cheese on a platter like it was any other evening, while my father calmly mixed drinks, ice clinking in tall glasses. "Mom, Dad," I choked out, breathless and trembling. "Tyler just destroyed my laptop. My thesis was on there. He broke it. On purpose." I held out the crumpled shell of my computer, the screen hanging by a wire, keys scattered like debris after a storm. I expected shock, outrage, immediate support. Instead, my mother let out a weary sigh and barely looked up. "Oh, sweetie, you're too sensitive," she said, brushing a piece of hair from her face. "I'm sure he didn't mean to break it that badly." I stared at her, stunned. "He slammed it onto the floor and stomped on it," I said, voice rising. "On purpose, a week before my thesis is due." My father gave the laptop a cursory glance and reached for another bottle of mixer. "These things happen," he said with a shrug. "You should have backed it up." "I do back it up," I snapped, incredulous. "But the last cloud save was from 2 weeks ago. The most important updates aren't there. I could lose everything." At that moment, Tyler swaggered into the kitchen, Jake and Brandon trailing behind him awkwardly. His expression was calm, even smug, like a child who knew he wouldn't be punished. "It was an accident," he said smoothly, lying without hesitation. "She's making it sound worse than it was." "You said, 'Who cares about your thesis?'" I shouted, pointing at him. "Then you smashed it. Don't lie." I turned to my parents, desperate for one of them to intervene. "He did it on purpose. He meant it." My father chuckled, as if I'd just told a mildly inappropriate joke. "Maybe she wasn't meant to graduate," he said casually, taking a sip from his drink. "Not everyone needs all those fancy degrees." The words hit me like a slap. After everything, years of excelling academically, fighting for recognition, earning scholarships, and now pouring my soul into a thesis that had real-world medical implications, he dismissed it all with a joke. My mother laughed along, adjusting slices of cheese on her tray like she was hosting a cocktail party instead of witnessing the collapse of her daughter's dreams. "We'll help you get a new computer after spring break," she added, as if that made things better. "But for now, why don't you just join the party? It might do you good to relax a little." I stood frozen, holding the battered corpse of my laptop, surrounded by people who were supposed to care about me, who were supposed to protect me. Instead, they mocked me, minimized me, acted like what had just happened wasn't a violation of trust, but a minor inconvenience. Over my mother's shoulder, Tyler smirked. He knew there would be no consequences, and that smirk, that smug, infuriating expression, was the final confirmation. Jake and Brandon shifted uncomfortably, the only ones who seemed to grasp that something serious had occurred, but they said nothing. Without another word, I turned and walked away, up the stairs and down the hall. I entered the only room in the house with a lock, the upstairs bathroom, and shut the door behind me. I slid down the wall, hugging the destroyed laptop to my chest like a wounded animal, the cold tile pressed against my skin, grounding me even as my world unraveled. I cried, not just from the loss of my thesis, but from something deeper, something more permanent. Through the bathroom door, I could hear laughter resuming downstairs. Music pounded, bottles clinked, conversations swelled and burst like fireworks. The party hadn't paused for a moment. No one came to check on me. No one cared. In that silence, something inside me finally gave way. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was the collapse of an illusion I had clung to my whole life, that one day my family would see me, respect me, be proud of me, that they would understand what I was trying to do and why it mattered. That belief shattered just as completely as my laptop. But in the quiet that followed, a new resolve began to take root, cold, clear, and undeniable. I didn't need their approval. I just needed to find a way forward. I didn't know how long I sat there, but eventually my breathing slowed, my tears dried. I examined the laptop again with measured detachment. The screen was pulverized, the case warped, but the hard drive, it might still be intact. There was a chance, however small, that the core data had survived. My most recent cloud backup was 2 weeks old, missing the last and most crucial optimizations to the algorithm and the entire final analysis section. I couldn't afford to start over. I needed help, real help, and it was clear I wouldn't find it in this house. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person I could think of, Rachel. She was a former classmate from undergrad, now working at a local tech startup. We hadn't stayed especially close, but she was nearby, and more importantly, she would understand what this meant. She answered on the third ring. Amber? Rachel, I said, my voice cracking. I'm sorry to call you like this. I know it's random, but I need help. It's an emergency. I told her everything. Each word felt like dragging glass over my tongue, but I needed someone to know, to understand, to care. Wait, your brother did what? She said, her voice rising with disbelief. And your parents laughed, she added. Her indignation gave me a strange kind of strength. They think I'm overreacting, I whispered. They don't understand. They never have. You're not overreacting, she said firmly. Amber, that's insane. Of course you're not. There was a pause, and then she continued. Listen, my roommate's out of town. You can crash at our place. We've got Wi-Fi, coffee, and it's quiet. You shouldn't be in that house another minute. Are you sure? I asked, overwhelmed. I don't want to impose. You're not. Pack your stuff, come over, we'll figure this out. Relief surged through me like oxygen after drowning. Thank you, I whispered. I'll text you when I'm on my way. I splashed cold water on my face, the chill jolting me back to the present. When I looked into the mirror, I barely recognized the girl staring back. My eyes were bloodshot, the skin beneath them swollen. My face was blotchy, streaked with the dried remnants of tears. But there, beneath all that raw grief, something else was beginning to emerge. An unfamiliar hardness around my jaw, a glint of steel behind my eyes. It wasn't just pain anymore, it was resolve, the kind that forms quietly, like a crystal taking shape in a jar of undisturbed solution. I unlocked the bathroom door and pressed my ear against it. The party downstairs showed no signs of stopping. Music still boomed from the living room, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the unmistakable sound of bottles clinking. I slipped out quietly and made my way to my bedroom, careful to avoid the jagged shards of plastic and glass still strewn across the floor, like the wreckage of a plane crash. I didn't stop to mourn it again. Instead, I pulled out my old black duffel bag from the closet and began packing with clinical precision. Be closed. Toothbrush. Laptop charger. Still intact, even if it was useless now. My external hard drive, a stack of printed research articles, my annotated notebooks, and every backup flash drive I could find. Each item went into the bag in silence, like packing for a war zone, not a weekend trip. I moved fast, my mind already running calculations. How much work had been lost, how much time I had left to fix it, and where I could possibly go that might allow me the clarity I needed. As I zipped up the bag, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I froze, breath caught in my throat, but the steps passed, accompanied by drunken giggling. Invisibility had always been a curse in this family, but for once, it worked in my favor. Before I left, I carefully gathered the remains of my laptop, piece by piece, and placed them into a large freezer bag. The hard drive might still be functional, and if there was even the slightest chance of recovering my data, I had to try. I took one last glance around my room. The framed certificates on the wall, perfect attendance, academic excellence, national math competitions, meant so much to me once, but now they felt hollow. Physical proof of a lifetime of accomplishments that had never been enough for the people who were supposed to care most. I crept downstairs, sticking close to the walls to avoid the living room, where the party had reached its peak. As I passed the kitchen, I heard voices, familiar ones. "Tyler feels terrible," my mother was saying, though her tone betrayed no urgency. "But Amber's always been so dramatic about school stuff. Remember when she cried over a B+ in 10th grade? She'll get over it," my father replied, his voice thick with condescension. "It's just a computer." Then Tyler chimed in, clearly not sounding the least bit remorseful. "She probably just wants an excuse because she wasn't going to finish it on time anyway." Laughter followed, casual, effortless, cruel. Each word sliced through me like broken glass. Without a sound, I slipped out the front door and into the quiet of the night. The cool spring air hit me like a balm, momentarily soothing the fire burning in my chest. I climbed into my car, placed the bag on the passenger seat, and pulled away from the house. My childhood home. Without looking back. The drive to Rachel's apartment was a blur of streetlights and mental math. I tried to estimate the damage, how many hours had been lost, how many sections I could reconstruct from memory, how much time I had left before my final thesis submission. The numbers swirled into something unmanageable, a storm of despair that only intensified with every turn of the wheel. When I arrived, Rachel was already at the door. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. She just pulled me into a long, silent hug. It was the first moment of comfort I had felt since the incident. "I made up the couch," she said gently, guiding me inside. "There's tea, or wine, or both, whatever you need." I collapsed onto the cushions, every inch of my body aching with the weight of everything I was holding together. "I don't even know where to start fixing this." Rachel sat beside me. "First things first, have you emailed your advisor?" I shook my head. It hadn't even crossed my mind in the chaos. "Do that now," she said firmly but gently. "Professor Martinez needs to know what happened. She might be able to help." I borrowed Rachel's tablet and composed a shaky email. I tried to keep it factual, but my hands trembled as I attached photos of the destroyed laptop. I hesitated before hitting send, doubt creeping in. "What if she thinks I'm making excuses?" I asked quietly, ashamed of how small I sounded. "She won't," Rachel said, with absolute certainty. "And if anyone can help, it's her." We stayed up late cataloging everything I'd lost and what might still be recoverable. The final version of my algorithm, the one I'd refined after invaluable feedback from a visiting professor, was not backed up, nor was the conclusion section that connected every part of my research. All of it was on the destroyed hard drive. If it wasn't salvageable, I would be looking at the loss of roughly 72 hours of intensive, focused work. "Worst case scenario," Rachel summarized, "is you've lost 3 days of progress." 72 hours, I echoed, the number both small and massive at once. But they were the most important 72. My phone buzzed with new messages, one from my mother. "Where did you go? It's rude to leave without saying goodbye. Tyler feels bad. You should come home and make up." I turned the phone off and shoved it deep into my bag. Sleep came in fits, haunted by dreams of shattered screens and laughter that wasn't kind. I woke before sunrise, heart pounding, brain already racing. I sat at Rachel's kitchen table with a fresh notebook and mapped out a recovery plan. Every minute had to count now. At 7:00 a.m. I received an email from Professor Martinez. "Amber, I'm appalled by what happened. Come to my office at 9:00 a.m. We'll figure this out together. Don't lose hope." For the first time since the destruction of my laptop, I felt a spark of something that almost resembled hope. I wasn't alone. I showered, dressed, and stared at my reflection once more. The blotches had faded, but what remained was someone new, not broken, not defeated. Someone who had nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. When I arrived at Professor Martinez's office, she welcomed me inside with calm authority. The room, always warm and slightly scented with mint tea and coffee, felt like a sanctuary amidst the ruins of my week. Her eyes darkened as she examined the laptop remains. "This wasn't an accident," she said, voice steady and cold. "The damage is too extensive." "No," I replied. "My brother did it deliberately." "I'm sure," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "My parents think I'm overreacting." Professor Martinez removed her glasses, her face tightening with a mix of disbelief and frustration. She pinched the bridge of her nose before looking directly at me. "Amber," she said, slowly and firmly, "let me be absolutely clear. This is not an overreaction. What happened to you wasn't just upsetting. It was a targeted, deliberate act of sabotage. It's appalling, and it is completely, unequivocally, unacceptable." Her words struck me like fresh air rushing into a room that had been sealed shut. For the first time since the night my laptop was destroyed, I could finally breathe again. The self-doubt that had been gnawing at me, nurtured by years of being told I was too sensitive or overdramatic, began to loosen its grip. "The real question now," she continued, shifting into her practical, no-nonsense mode, "is how we move forward. You've got 6 days left until your final submission deadline, so let's get to work figuring out what can be salvaged and what needs to be rebuilt." Without waiting for my response, she picked up her office phone and called Raj, the IT specialist for the computer science department. She summarized the situation in concise, urgent language, emphasizing the timeline and the potential significance of the lost data. Within the hour, Raj met us in the lab, gently placing the shattered remnants of my laptop on a static-free workstation. He examined the device with practiced eyes. "This machine took a serious hit," he said, slipping on gloves as he opened the casing. "But I'll do everything I can to recover your files. I can't promise anything, though. This hard drive may be too damaged." While Raj worked with careful precision, Professor Martinez and I sat at a side table, outlining a worst-case scenario contingency plan. "You'll have 24/7 access to the Advanced Algorithms Lab," she said, handing me a special access keycard. "The lab's equipped with our most powerful machines. I've already informed the department head about your situation. You'll have full authorization to work as long as you need." "And what if I can't recreate everything in time?" I asked quietly, voicing the fear that had been festering in the back of my mind since the moment Tyler's foot came down on my laptop. "Then we request an emergency extension," she said without hesitation. "You're not alone in this, but let's not borrow trouble. First, let's see what Raj can recover, then we plan accordingly." Hours passed in tense silence. Finally, by mid-afternoon, Raj returned with an update. "Good news and bad news," he said, pulling up a list of recovered files. "I managed to salvage about 80% of your documents, but several of the most recent files, your final algorithm optimizations and part of your thesis conclusion, are corrupted beyond recovery." I stared at the screen, heart heavy. "It's better than nothing," I said, trying to inject optimism into my voice. "A lot better than I feared." Professor Martinez nodded. "Now we make a detailed timeline. We reconstruct what we've lost." Together, we laid out an aggressive but feasible recovery schedule. 16-hour workdays, starting immediately. We'd rebuild the most complex algorithm modules first, then move to the statistical validation, and finally recompose the missing portions of the conclusion. She offered to personally review each section I rewrote, giving real-time feedback to accelerate the process. "I can't thank you enough," I said, looking up at her as we finalized the timeline. "Don't thank me yet," she replied with a wry but determined smile. "Thank me when this thesis is submitted, on time, and you walk across that stage in honors regalia." That evening, I began my first overnight work session in the lab. As I settled into my new reality, armed with a backup workstation, half a dozen recovery flash drives, and a fresh document template, my phone lit up. My mother was calling. I hesitated, then with a sigh I answered. "Amber, where are you?" she demanded, her tone sharp with irritation rather than worry. "We've been worried sick." "I'm at the university," I said evenly. "I'm staying with a friend." "This is ridiculous," she scoffed. "Running away doesn't solve anything. Tyler feels terrible about the accident." "It wasn't an accident," I said, surprisingly calm. "He deliberately destroyed my laptop, and with it, potentially my academic career. And neither of you did anything." "That's not true. We offered to help you get a new computer." "After spring break," I reminded her, which would have been too late. "My thesis is due in 6 days." There was a pause, then she said, "Surely they'll give you an extension under the circumstances." The circumstances being that my brother maliciously smashed my work and my parents laughed about it, I said, the word sharp now. "You're twisting what happened," she said quickly. "Tyler made a mistake. We all make mistakes." "A mistake is forgetting to save a file," I replied coldly. "What he did was intentional, and your response showed me exactly where I stand in this family." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm done chasing validation. That's never going to come," I said. "I have work to do now. I'll let you know when I'm coming to get the rest of my things." I ended the call before she could respond and shut my phone off completely. For the next 3 days, I lived inside that lab. I slept on a folding cot in the break room, showered in the campus gym, and survived on vending machine snacks and delivery orders. Rachel stopped by every day with fresh clothes and home-cooked meals. Professor Martinez checked in every few hours, offering notes and encouragement. On the 4th day, Rachel's cousin Marcus showed up with Thai food and a curious expression. "Rachel told me everything," he said as he unpacked the containers. "I work at Tech Fusion downtown. We specialize in data recovery and predictive modeling. I thought I might be able to help." Marcus spent his entire lunch break reviewing my partially reconstructed code. He offered invaluable suggestions for improving the performance of the new algorithm and flagged several areas where the old logic had memory issues. Before leaving, he handed me a business card. "When this is over, give me a call," he said with a smile. "We're always looking for algorithm specialists, and I promise, we won't smash your laptop." That afternoon, 3 classmates from my algorithm design seminar arrived unannounced, each carrying coffee and determination. "Professor Martinez mentioned you might need reinforcements," said Eliza, the sharpest coder in our class. "We've all had our own thesis nightmares, though yours wins hands down." For 8 straight hours we debugged, rebuilt, and restructured. They helped reconstruct documentation I thought I'd never see again and caught subtle inconsistencies in the restored sections. Their support turned a solitary nightmare into a collaborative battle, and for the first time, I believed I might actually win. In between coding sessions, I consulted with the university's legal aid clinic. A law student intern confirmed what I suspected. "You have a viable small claims case," she said. "The laptop alone is worth about $1,200.00. But you may be able to claim additional damages, lost time, lost professional opportunities. Keep documenting everything." After the visit to the university legal aid office, I began keeping meticulous records. Every hour I spent reconstructing lost work was logged. I archived every email exchanged with Professor Martinez, saved the photos I'd taken of my destroyed laptop, and even obtained a signed statement from Raj in IT affirming the deliberate damage done to my hard drive. Each piece of documentation was a step toward justice, a quiet act of resistance against the silence my family had shown. By the morning of the 5th day, I had not only reconstructed my core algorithm, but also made surprising progress on the revised conclusion section. Professor Martinez reviewed the recoded algorithm and, to my amazement, smiled. "This version is actually more elegant than your original draft," she said, scrolling through the new lines of code with interest. "Sometimes, starting over forces us to reevaluate. You've sharpened your logic, made your data pathways more efficient." Her validation lit a spark inside me. It wasn't just a recovery, it was an improvement. I had taken destruction and turned it into innovation. That night, I didn't leave the lab. I worked straight through until dawn, fueled by caffeine, sheer grit, and the unwavering support of people who believed in me. While my family had turned their backs, strangers, colleagues, and mentors had rallied behind me. It was a truth I hadn't wanted to see before, but now, it was impossible to ignore. As the sun broke through the narrow windows of the lab, I sat back in my chair and watched the final round of algorithm tests run across the screen. The results were perfect. Every output matched the predicted values in my research model. The entire system was stable. My conclusion section, now rewritten with greater clarity and force, tied everything together with a precision that even surprised me. I had done it. Despite the chaos, the heartbreak, the betrayal, I had rebuilt my thesis. It wasn't the exact version that had been destroyed. In many ways it was better, tighter, more focused, more compelling. There was only one task remaining: final formatting and proofreading. I had 1 full day before the submission deadline, and I would use every second of it to ensure perfection. And after that, I had one more thing to do. I needed to return to the place where all this had started, to face the people who believed they had destroyed my future, and walk out, not as the victim of their cruelty, but as the architect of my own triumph. Exactly 1 week after Tyler smashed my laptop, I submitted my completed thesis. All 157 pages of it, meticulously formatted, documented, analyzed, and presented, were uploaded to the university's Thesis portal. Professor Martinez stood beside me as I clicked the final confirmation button. The upload bar turned green. A message flashed on screen. Submission complete. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," I corrected her. "None of this would have been possible without your support." Her smile held more pride than words could express. Relief flooded me, but it wasn't the only emotion. As the academic crisis resolved, a different feeling rose in its place. A cold, steady anger. It wasn't loud. It wasn't impulsive. It was calm, calculated, and clear. My family had tried to end something precious to me. They had underestimated me. And now, I intended to show them exactly what I had accomplished in spite of them. "What will you do now?" Professor Martinez asked as we stepped out into the courtyard. "I'm going to get the rest of my things from my parents' house," I replied. "And then I'm filing a police report and a small claims case against my brother." She didn't flinch. "Do you want someone to go with you?" I thought about it, then shook my head. "No. This is something I need to do alone." The drive to my parents' home felt surreal. Each familiar street, each stop sign I'd rolled through as a teenager, now seemed like part of another life. I arrived mid-afternoon, knowing my parents would be home but hoping Tyler was still at work. My mother opened the door, surprise flashing across her face before she schooled it into a warm maternal smile. "Amber, thank goodness, you're back. We've been so worried." "I'm not back," I said flatly. "I'm here to get the rest of my things." Her smile faltered. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course you're staying. This dramatic little episode has gone on long enough." I stepped past her into the house. It looked smaller than I remembered. "I submitted my thesis yesterday, no thanks to anyone here." My father looked up from the living room couch, newspaper in hand. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence." "I'm just here for my belongings," I repeated, heading toward the stairs. "Amber," my mother called after me, "you need to talk to Tyler. He feels terrible about what happened." I paused halfway up. "Is he here?" "No. He's at your uncle's job site, but he'll be home for dinner. We can all sit down, talk things through, work past this, as a family." The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh. That won't be necessary. In my old bedroom, everything was exactly as I had left it, including the broken fragments of my laptop, still scattered on the floor. No one had bothered to clean them up. I took more photos, new evidence for my case, and then began packing the last of my things. Downstairs, I could hear my parents whispering, their voices low and urgent. I ignored them. I had almost finished when I heard the front door open. Tyler's voice rang up the stairs. "Is that Amber's car outside?" I tensed. Moments later, heavy footsteps climbed toward me. Tyler appeared in my doorway, leaning against the frame, just as he had when he destroyed my laptop. "Hey," he said, wearing a carefully constructed expression of remorse. "Look, I'm really sorry about what happened. I was drunk. It was stupid." I kept packing. Didn't look at him. "Yes, it was." "So we're good now, right?" he pushed. "Water under the bridge?" I stood up and met his eyes. "No, Tyler, we're not good." He blinked. "You destroyed my laptop and almost derailed my entire career. That's not something you just brush off." The fake apology dropped from his face, replaced by a sneer. "Jesus, you're still on about that? It was just a laptop. Mom and Dad said they'd help you buy a new one." "It wasn't just a laptop," I said, voice steady. "It was my thesis, my research, my future." "You act like you're the only one who works hard," he snapped. I zipped the last bag closed. "No, I act like someone who doesn't give up." He crossed his arms. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means some of us don't drop out because things get hard." The insult hung heavy in the room. Cruel, maybe, but it was the truth, and for once, I wasn't afraid to say it. I had moved beyond caring about how Tyler felt. Whatever guilt he attempted to conjure now was too little, too late. His face darkened with a defensive sneer, the mask of remorse slipping entirely. "You think you're better than me just because you've got your fancy degree and your complicated computer crap?" he spat. "Newsflash, Amber. Nobody cares about that stuff in the real world." I straightened, my voice as calm as it was resolute. "Actually, the real world values my work quite a lot," I said, thinking of Marcus's encouraging offer at Tech Fusion and Professor Martinez's influential contacts in the tech industry. which is why I'm filing a police report for destruction of property and suing you in small claims court for damages." His mocking expression faltered, confusion twisting into disbelief. "You're what?" "You heard me." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded document, carefully prepared and printed the night before. I held it out to him. "This is your official notice of the small claims filing. You've been served." He just stared at it, frozen. "You're joking, right? You're suing me. Your own brother. The brother who destroyed thousands of dollars of my property while our parents stood by and did nothing? Yes, I am." When he refused to take the paper, I calmly placed it on the bed. "The hearing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. I suggest you start setting money aside." I had barely finished speaking when thunderous footsteps echoed up the stairs. My parents had clearly overheard every word. They rushed into the room, faces flushed with indignation and disbelief. "Amber, have you lost your mind?" my father barked, eyes wide with outrage. "You can't sue your own brother." "Actually," I replied without hesitation, "I can, and I am." I shouldered my bag and picked up the box holding my awards, research journals, and personal mementos. "Also, I've filed a formal police report for malicious destruction of property." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest in theatrical horror. "A police report? Amber, if Tyler gets a record, he could lose his job." "Then maybe," I said coldly, "he should have thought about that before smashing my laptop. Actions have consequences." "This is insane," my father sputtered, eyes bulging. "You're tearing this family apart over a computer?" "It wasn't just a computer," I said, refusing to let my voice waver. "It was my thesis, my future. And Tyler just admitted it wasn't an accident. He said himself that he was drunk and acted stupidly, and you enabled him. You laughed, you excused it, as you always have." My mother's voice turned saccharine and condescending. "Sweetheart, I think you're having some kind of breakdown. Maybe school has just been too much pressure." "I finished my thesis," I said sharply. "I submitted it yesterday, despite Tyler's sabotage. Despite your indifference. I did it. Without your help." Tyler, who had remained quiet through the exchange, suddenly found his voice again. "If you go through with this," he growled, "don't expect any more help with your tuition. Dad was going to pay your final semester, but I guess you don't need family support anymore." He was meant to be a threat, the final card he could play, but I was ready. "I've already applied for emergency completion funding through the department," I replied evenly. "Professor Martinez has personally endorsed my application. I'm not depending on your conditional support anymore." My father's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "After everything we've done for you? This is how you repay us?" "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked, the question genuine, not sarcastic. "I've been on scholarship since I started college. I've worked part-time to cover expenses. You've never once asked about my research, never once showed pride in what I do. So tell me, what am I supposed to be so grateful for?" They had no answer. My mother looked genuinely hurt. My father's anger faltered into uncertainty. Only Tyler stayed the same, angry, smug, and unwilling to take responsibility. "You know what?" he snapped. "Go ahead with your stupid lawsuit. No one told you to leave your precious laptop lying around where it could get broken." "It was in my bedroom, Tyler," I shot back. "You came into my space, specifically to destroy it." "You can't prove that," he sneered. "Actually, I can," I said. "Your friends Jake and Brandon were there. Jake's already agreed to give a statement." That was a bluff. I hadn't actually spoken to Jake, but the flicker of panic in Tyler's eyes told me it had landed. He knew Jake might fold under pressure. I picked up the last of my boxes and walked past the stunned trio that had once been my family. I moved down the stairs, past the living room, past every photograph that had always centered around Tyler's achievements. As I reached the front door, my mother followed me, desperate now. "Amber, please," she begged, tears streaking her face. "We're your family, you can't do this to us." I paused, one hand on the doorknob, and turned to face her. "A family supports each other," I said quietly. "A family respects each other's dreams and values. That's not what happens in this house." "We love you," she insisted. "Maybe," I said, nodding slightly. "But you don't respect me, and I can't keep pretending that's enough." I walked out to my car, loaded the last box into the trunk, and slid into the driver's seat. As I pulled away, I looked once in the rearview mirror, watching the house shrink behind me. It wasn't just a building I was leaving. It was a whole chapter of my life. A chapter full of pain, invalidation, and longing for approval that would never come. There was grief, yes, but also freedom. Over the next 3 weeks, I poured myself into preparing for my thesis defense. I worked daily with Professor Martinez, anticipating every potential question the committee might throw my way. My new apartment, a modest studio near campus, furnished with thrift store finds, became my haven. Simple, quiet, mine. When the day of the small claims court hearing arrived, Tyler didn't show up. My parents did. They sat at the back of the courtroom in silence, offering no support, no acknowledgement. I presented my case methodically. Photos of the broken laptop, the IT department's report detailing the damage, the documentation of hours lost, the emails with Professor Martinez outlining the academic risks, and the statement from my advisor about how close I came to losing a prestigious opportunity because of my brother's actions. The judge ruled swiftly. Tyler was ordered to pay $3,800.00 compensation for the cost of a new laptop and additional damages related to lost work time and potential professional harm. I walked out of the courtroom with a copy of the judgment in hand. I had no illusions that Tyler would pay willingly or without complaint. But the ruling mattered. It was proof that what happened wasn't just an unfortunate incident. It was real. It was wrong. And I had done something about it. It was a clear and decisive victory in court, yet as I stood outside the courtroom and watched my parents quietly leave without offering a single word, without even meeting my gaze, I felt a sharp hollowness settle beneath the surface of vindication. I had won, yes, but that absence of acknowledgement from the two people who should have been in my corner from the beginning carved out a place in my chest where grief coiled, silent and unresolved. That evening, after returning to my modest studio, I sat at my desk, preparing for my thesis defense scheduled for the following week. I was formatting my presentation slides when an unexpected email notification popped up on my screen. It was from Tech Innovate, the prestigious research firm that had shown interest in my work weeks earlier, before the laptop incident had threatened to derail everything. The subject line read, "Follow-up on thesis review, Tech Innovate opportunity." I clicked it open, heart racing. "Dear Amber, we recently received a preliminary version of your thesis from Professor Martinez, who spoke highly of your work and noted your resilience during unexpected setbacks. We want to commend you not only for your innovative approach, but also for your perseverance under pressure. Our offer to review your completed work for potential employment still stands. We would be pleased to reconnect following your defense to explore collaboration opportunities. Sincerely, the Tech Innovate research team." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. This was confirmation, not just of my academic abilities, but of my decision to stand firm even when it meant risking the last frayed threads of familial connection. My family's support may have proven elusive, but in its place I had built something stronger, the foundation of a future based on my own merit, surrounded by people who recognized and respected my efforts. I closed my laptop, the new one, purchased with the damages awarded by the court, and allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. Tyler had destroyed a machine, yes, but he hadn't destroyed me. If anything, he had inadvertently sharpened my focus, pushed me to test the limits of my resilience, and helped me discover just how deeply rooted my strength really was. The morning of my thesis defense arrived with a clarity that matched the sky. Blue, bright, unblemished. Sunshine streamed through the high windows of the computer science department's main conference room. I stood at the podium, my notes carefully arranged in front of me, facing the 5 professors who would evaluate the culmination of my academic career. Professor Martinez sat among them, her expression calm but encouraging. A slight smile played at her lips, subtle but present. The room fell silent as I began to speak. For the next 45 minutes, I outlined my research in predictive algorithms for healthcare data analysis. I explained my methodology, demonstrated how the algorithm could identify patterns to assist in early detection of diseases, and walked through case studies based on anonymized hospital data. As the committee's questions began, they quickly escalated in complexity. But the hours of preparation paid off. My answers were confident, my logic was sound, and each response was backed by a deeper understanding forged during those grueling nights of rebuilding. When the committee chair finally leaned forward and said, "Congratulations, Miss Harrison, your thesis has been accepted, with distinction," it took everything in me not to cry. It wasn't just about academic validation, it was proof that I had done it. I had overcome every obstacle, technical, emotional, and interpersonal, that had tried to stand in my way, and I had done it on my terms. After the faculty members filed out, Professor Martinez approached me. "That was one of the strongest defenses I've seen in years," she said, and for once, her tone was not professional restraint, but warm, unguarded pride. "You didn't just survive, Ember. You thrived. You turned adversity into clarity, into purpose." "I couldn't have done it without you," I told her, feeling the inadequacy of those words. No phrase could capture how much her guidance had meant to me. She shook her head gently. "I opened doors," she said. "You walked through them. Every step was your own." Graduation came the following weekend. I stood in line with my fellow master's candidates, the ceremonial hood heavy across my shoulders, a symbol of everything it had taken to reach that moment. I scanned the audience. There was no sign of my parents, no Tyler. But what surprised me was how little it mattered. Their absence no longer felt like a wound. It felt like release. Rachel was there, sitting proudly in the third row. Beside her was Marcus, who had not only encouraged me professionally but offered genuine friendship, the kind built on shared respect and mutual curiosity. And in the faculty section, Professor Martinez watched quietly, nodding with dignified approval as I crossed the stage to receive my diploma. They were my family now, my chosen circle. They believed in effort, in potential, in integrity. They had seen my worth without needing it to serve their own egos. 3 days later, a check for $3,800, 0 cents, arrived in the mail. Tyler's court-ordered restitution. It wasn't just compensation for a broken laptop. It was an official acknowledgement that what had happened was not trivial. It was wrong. He had tried to sabotage something precious, and the legal system had recognized that truth. According to a curt email from my father, they had ultimately loaned Tyler the money so he could put this ridiculous situation behind us. I didn't reply. I used part of the money to purchase a powerful, high-performance laptop, an investment in my new role at Tech Fusion, where I had just accepted a position working on healthcare-factored algorithmic solutions. The rest went toward a security deposit on a larger, more comfortable apartment near the company's headquarters. 2 weeks into the job, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number I hadn't seen in over a month. My mother. I let it go to voicemail, then reconsidered and called her back. "We miss you," she said, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. "Your father and I have been talking, and we realize we may have mishandled things." It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest she had ever come to one. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. She hesitated. "Tyler's having a hard time. He lost his job with your uncle's company, and he's struggling to find work. This legal situation hasn't helped." The misdemeanor charge from the police report had resulted in probation and a fine, but the record would follow him for years. "That's unfortunate," I said. "I didn't offer more. We thought maybe you could talk to him," she suggested, almost timidly. "Help him figure out what to do next. You've always been so good at planning, organizing." The irony almost made me laugh. The very skills they'd dismissed as obsessive or boring were now tools they hoped I would use to rescue Tyler. "I can't fix this for him, Mom," I said gently. "Tyler made his choices, just like I made mine." "But we're family," she pressed, resorting to the oldest, most exhaustive defense. "Being family," I said, "means holding each other accountable. It means respecting boundaries, and it means understanding when someone says, no. Boundaries. It's a word I once struggled to understand, let alone enforce. But life has a way of teaching you the lessons you avoid, and I learned that one the hard way." There was a long pause on the phone line after I told my mother that being family doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. It means accountability and mutual respect. Eventually she spoke again, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Will we ever see you again?" There was real pain in the question, and despite everything, despite the betrayal, the silence, the laughter that followed the smashing of my dreams, I felt a pang of empathy. They were my parents, flawed, imperfect, deeply frustrating, but they were still my roots. "I'm not cutting you out of my life," I told her gently, "but our relationship has to change. I need you both to acknowledge that my work, my goals, they matter. I need you to understand that what Tyler did wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate and it was serious." "I'm trying to understand," she said. It wasn't much, but it was something, a crack in the wall of denial that had long defined their version of our family story. In the months that followed, I held firmly to the boundaries I'd established. I visited occasionally, short, structured interactions like Sunday brunches or a quick afternoon coffee. I didn't stay long. I didn't explain every detail of my life, and I never brought up the past unless they did first. Tyler and I remained distant. We were civil, but the damage had left a permanent shift in the axis of our relationship. Some fractures don't heal the same way twice. He eventually landed another job, thanks to a friend's referral. His easy charm had always helped him rebound, and despite the misdemeanor on his record, he found a place willing to give him a second chance. Meanwhile, my own career was blossoming in ways I had once only dreamed of. 6 months after graduation, my algorithm, yes, the very one Tyler had tried to wipe out, was integrated into a pilot program at 3 regional hospitals. It was already helping identify early markers for cardiovascular disease. My research wasn't just academically sound, it was saving lives. And every time I received data showing that a diagnosis had been caught early, every time I saw a graph stabilizing thanks to the model I'd built, I felt something profound, a quiet triumph. I had turned my pain into purpose. A year after the incident, an unexpected message arrived in my inbox. It was from Jake, Tyler's friend, one of the silent witnesses that awful night. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he wrote. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I knew it was wrong, but I froze. Watching how you stood up for yourself made me think about how often I let things slide when I shouldn't. I want to be better about that." His apology stirred something unexpected in me, hope, not for reconciliation with Tyler, but in the idea that standing up for yourself can ripple outward. My decision to act, to demand respect, had prompted someone else to reflect on their own silence. Change, it seemed, had a longer reach than I'd thought. But the most significant transformation wasn't in Jake, it was in me. I no longer based my worth on the approval of my family. I stopped chasing validation from people who never really saw me. I had built a life, no, a home, in a space that reflected my values, surrounded by people who believed in hard work, honesty, and mutual respect. The laptop that Tyler had destroyed, that had been a symbol of everything I'd invested in my future, but the lessons I'd built from that shattered device became the blueprint for the woman I had become. One evening, as Marcus and I worked late in our shared office, reviewing data from a challenging project, he looked up and asked me quietly, "Do you ever regret taking your brother to court? That must have been hard, going up against your own family like that." I sat with the question for a moment before answering. "I regret that it was necessary," I said finally, "but I don't regret doing it. Standing up for yourself isn't always the easy thing, but it's often the right thing." He nodded thoughtfully. "Well, for what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Your work matters too much to be dismissed like that." That simple statement, that quiet belief in the value of what I'd built, meant more to me than he probably knew. My family had never managed to say those words, but he had, and so had Rachel, and Professor Martinez, and now, Tech Innovate, where I had received my first formal offer to present at a research conference. When Tyler smashed my laptop, he broke more than a piece of technology. He shattered the last fragile illusion I'd held about my family, that somewhere beneath the indifference, the favoritism, the laughter at my expense, there was a well of unconditional support. There wasn't. But from those broken pieces, I had forged something stronger than blind loyalty. I had built a life defined by self-respect, by intellectual rigor, by relationships rooted in equality and truth. Some people will never value what you offer until you stop offering it. Others will recognize your worth from the beginning and help you see it in yourself. The wisdom lies in learning the difference, and in choosing to pour your energy into the people and places where your light is reflected back, not swallowed whole. Sometimes, the family we choose can nurture us in ways the family we were born into never could. So if you're facing your own version of a shattered laptop, whether literal or metaphorical, if someone has tried to destroy what matters most to you, let me offer this. It's not the setback that defines you, it's what you do after. Speak your truth, hold your boundaries, rebuild, stronger, wiser, and freer than before. The life you create from those broken pieces might just be more beautiful and more authentically yours than anything you could have planned. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who didn't support your dreams? If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments below. And please, hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about reclaiming your voice, overcoming family challenges, and building the life you truly deserve. Thank you for listening to my journey. And always remember, your worth is not defined by those who can't see it.